It was just another Friday night, and there I was, sprawled on my couch, buried under a pile of investment portfolios that needed reviewing by Monday. My phone buzzed insistently on the coffee table, breaking my concentration for the umpteenth time that evening. The screen lit up with a message from Jess, my best friend since college and a perpetual source of chaos in my otherwise orderly life. "Ella, you better not be working tonight. We've got plans, remember?" Jess's text read, a hint of a threat underlying her playful tone. I sighed, rubbing the bridge of my nose, before typing a reluctant reply. "I remember, Jess. Just let me finish this last section." "Where are you dragging me to again?" "Quit your grumbling. It's that new Quest game downtown. It's gonna be epic. Plus, you need a break. Work can wait." She responded almost immediately, her impatience palpable even through text. I met Jess and the rest of the gang at the lobby of Mystery Manor, a place that looked more like a haunted house than a fun night out. The game host briefed us on the rules and the backstory of our adventure. We were to solve a series of puzzles to escape the manor, and our group was not the only one participating that night. As we were divided into teams, I found myself paired with a guy named Tom. He was from another company, a fact I only gleaned because his work badge was still clipped to his jeans. Tom seemed just as out of place as I felt, his hands tucked awkwardly into his pockets as he offered me a shy smile. "So, not really your scene either?" I ventured, trying to break the ice as we approached our first clue. Tom chuckled, his smile reaching his eyes. "You could say that. I got roped into this by my sister. She thinks I need to get out more." "Sounds like we're in the same boat. My friend thinks this will cure my workaholism," I replied, rolling my eyes. We spent the next hour navigating through cobwebbed corridors and solving riddles that designed to confuse rather than enlighten. Tom proved to be surprisingly insightful, his quiet demeanor belying a sharp wit that caught me off guard more than once. "You're pretty good at this," I noted as he unlocked a particularly tricky cipher that had stumped me. He shrugged, a small grin tugging at his lips. "I like puzzles. Keeps the mind sharp. How about you? What's your excuse for being so quick with these clues?" "Just a lot of practice with problem solving at work, I guess. Investment decisions aren't so different from puzzles, just with higher stakes," I explained, warming up to him as we delved deeper into the game. As we cracked the last code and escaped the manor, Tom turned to me, his eyes bright with excitement. "That was actually fun. Thanks for being such a great team partner, Ella." "No, thank you. I was dreading tonight, but this turned out to be a blast," I admitted, feeling a strange reluctance at the night coming to an end. We exchanged numbers, a move that surprised me more than it probably should have. As I watched Tom disappear into the night, a part of me hoped this wouldn't be the last I saw of him. After that quirky night at the escape room, things with Tom picked up speed faster than I ever expected. We started seeing each other regularly, finding comfort in our shared love for dry humor and disdain for unnecessary social gatherings. When I first met Tom's family, I was nervous, wondering if they'd accept me. His parents were instantly welcoming, warm smiles and hearty hugs making me feel right at home. But Karen, Tom's older sister, was another story entirely. Right from the start, she sized me up with a look that could chill a glass of beer. "So you're the one Tom's been all crazy about," she said with a sneer, her tone dripping with something less than enthusiasm. Life after marriage felt like stepping onto a fast-moving train. Just a few months in, and we were already on to our next big adventure, pregnancy. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared. Holding down a demanding job while growing a human inside me? Yeah, it sounded like a plot for disaster. But Tom was a rock, always there with his unshakable calm. "Hey, you're going to be an amazing mom," Tom reassured me one evening as we sat on our couch, my feet in his lap after a particularly rough day. "And don't worry about work. We'll figure it out together." "Yeah, I know, but you've seen me with plants, Tom. They barely survive a week," I quipped, trying to mask my anxiety with humor. The pregnancy wasn't kind to me. Every morning was a battle against nausea. I remember one meeting where I had to excuse myself every half hour, rushing to the restroom while my colleagues waited patiently. The day of the delivery was a blur of pain and panic. I clung to Tom's hand, the only anchor I had as the waves of contractions tried to pull me under. The doctors buzzed around, their faces tense as they monitored the situation. It wasn't going well. "Mrs. Carter, we need to do an emergency C-section. It's the best chance for your baby," the lead doctor finally said, looking me straight in the eye as if willing me to understand the gravity of the situation. I barely nodded, my body racked with another painful contraction, as they wheeled me into the operating room. The last thing I remember was Tom's voice, soft and steady, telling me he loved me. When I woke up, the room was silent. The kind of silence that suffocates. Tom was there, his face pale and strained. He took my hand, tears brimming in his eyes, but not falling. "Ella, I'm so sorry. We lost him." The world stopped. No, that's not quite right. It shattered, a million pieces of me scattering to the wind. Our baby boy, the little life we had dreamed of and prepared for, gone before he even had a chance to cry, to see the world, to know how much he was loved. The doctors were kind but firm. "You won't be able to conceive again," they told us after a battery of tests. It was clinical, the finality of it, but nothing about that moment felt clinical to me. It felt like another loss, a future stolen from us. Tom and I went home, to a house filled with unopened baby gifts and a nursery that would remain empty. 5 years have passed since then. Tom's mom had passed away last year, and the old man was getting more and more withdrawn, spending days by himself in that big, echoing house. Tom and I had a long talk over some seriously strong coffee one Saturday morning. "We can't just leave him like this, Ella. It's not right," Tom said, running his hands through his hair, looking all worn and worried. I nodded, taking a sip of my coffee, feeling it bitter and hot down my throat. "I know, babe. It makes sense. Let's move in for a while, help him out. It'll be good, being together." Tom gave me this grateful look, like I'd just lifted 100 pounds off his shoulders. So, we packed up our stuff, not much, and by the following weekend, we were setting up in his dad's guest rooms. The first evening we moved in, the air was cool and the house smelled like lavender and old books. We were just about to have dinner, the three of us, when there was a loud banging on the door. It was Karen, of course, coming in with her usual flair for drama, her 2 kids trailing behind her like lost puppies. "What's this all about then? Moving in on Dad, now that Mom's gone?" she snapped as soon as she stepped in, not even a hello. She dropped her purse loudly on the table, her eyes darting around like she was looking for hidden treasure. "Karen, calm down. We're just trying to help Dad, not take over," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. It was hard, though, with her staring me down like I'd stolen something. Tom's dad shuffled into the room, his face lighting up seeing the kids. "Karen, let it be. They're here to help, and I'm glad for it. Sit down, have some dinner," she huffed, plopping down at the table, still eyeing me suspiciously. "Just seems mighty convenient, that's all. Mom's barely cold and here you are." Dinner was tense after that. I tried making small talk, asking the kids about school, but Karen kept drumming her fingers on the table, her eyes sharp and calculating. After we ate, she pulled Tom aside, whispering fiercely enough that I caught snatches of it. "Not right, taking advantage, always the saint, aren't you?" Tom's reply was too low for me to hear, but from the set of his jaw, I knew he was holding back a storm. When they finished, Karen grabbed her kids and stormed out, not even a goodbye to her dad. Later, cleaning up the dishes, Tom's dad put his hand on my shoulder. "Don't mind her, Ella. She's always been fiery. You're doing a good thing here." I smiled, wiping down the counter. "Thanks, Dad. It means a lot, hearing that from you." Despite the tension with Karen, life at Tom's dad's house settled into a routine. I kept up with my job, the days long but fulfilling. Evenings and weekends were our time to breathe a bit, with Tom, his dad, and me trying to make the best out of our days together. His dad, recovering from his grief and loneliness, seemed genuinely thankful for our company. He started treating me like a daughter than a daughter-in-law, always making sure I felt welcomed and valued. "Thank you, Ella, for everything. This house felt too big and too empty without your laughter," he'd tell me as we'd sit down to dinner, a simple meal brightened by the warmth of family. But while one relationship grew stronger, another spiraled further into cold hostility. Karen's attitude towards me shifted from mere disdain to outright hostility. Whenever we were alone, without Tom or his dad around, she'd unleash her bitterness. One afternoon, I was tidying up the living room when Karen dropped by. As usual, her entrance was quiet, almost stealthy, knowing that her father and Tom were out. "Ella, still playing the dutiful wife and daughter-in-law, I see," she sneered as she walked in, her eyes scanning the room like she might find something amiss. I straightened up, facing her. "Karen, I'm not playing at anything. I'm here because I care." Karen laughed, a harsh sound that echoed a bit too sharply against the walls. "Care? Or are you just securing your future here, since you can't have your own family?" The words stung, more than I wanted to admit. "That's a low blow, Karen. Why do you have to make it personal?" "Because it is personal, Ella. You're here, playing house, while knowing you'll never continue the family line. My kids are the real heirs. You're just occupying space." I took a deep breath, clenching my fists to keep calm. "Karen, I'm here because your father and Tom need me. We're family now, whether you like it or not." She scoffed, stepping closer. "Family? You think just because you married my brother and moved in here, you're family? You'll never really be one of us." Before I could respond, she turned on her heel and left, her words hanging heavy in the air. Later that evening, when Tom and his dad came back, Karen transformed like she always did. Smiling, engaging, and utterly flawless in her role as the devoted daughter. It was as if our earlier confrontation had never happened. At dinner, she talked animatedly about her children's school activities, weaving herself back into the fabric of the family with practiced ease. I watched her, marveling at the stark difference in her demeanor. Tom, catching my eye, gave me a small, knowing look. He squeezed my hand under the table, a silent message of solidarity. After dinner, while washing up, Tom leaned in. "I saw that look during dinner. Did something happen with Karen today?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, the usual. Her words. Tom, they do hurt." Tom frowned, his features hardening. "I know, Ella. I'm sorry. I wish she'd see what she's doing to us. But listen, you are part of this family. Don't ever doubt that." This year, I decided to keep my birthday low-key, celebrating it quietly at my father-in-law's house with just the close family. It felt right, more like a gathering of warmth and comfort, something I craved more as each year passed. Karen and her family were the last to arrive. As soon as she stepped through the door, she thrust her two kids towards me with a smirk, saying, "Here, Ella, I'm sure you're not tired of kids yet. It'll do you good to feel like a full-fledged woman for a change." I bit back the sharp retort that sprang to my lips, choosing instead to smile and usher the children inside, not wanting to start my birthday with a confrontation. Dinner was a lively affair with chatter and laughter, at least on the surface. Karen passed me a gift, a small, elegantly wrapped box. "Why don't you open this later, in your room? When no one will bother you," she whispered, her voice dripping with false sweetness that sent a ripple of anxiety through me. I nodded, tucking the box beside me, my smile fixed. The meal progressed, and just as I was starting to relax, Karen's youngest son, sitting on my lap, looked up at me with innocent eyes and asked loudly, "What does infertile mean?" "Mommy said that's what you are." The words hung heavy in the air, a suffocating silence falling over the table. I froze, words lodged in my throat, the room suddenly feeling too tight. Tom was quick to intervene, his voice calm but firm as he redirected the conversation to a safer topic. I barely heard the words, my heart thudding painfully in my chest. Excusing myself under the pretense of needing to freshen up, I escaped to the sanctuary of the next room. My hands were shaking as I pulled Karen's gift from the folds of my napkin. The unease I'd felt earlier blossomed into full-blown dread as I unwrapped it. Inside the box was a small doll, a grotesque mimicry of a newborn, smeared with what looked like blood. Attached was a note, cruel and heartless. Maybe now you'll remember what you did to your child. A gasp escaped me, and my hands trembled violently. Tom! I called out, my voice breaking with panic and grief. Tom rushed in, his face blanching as he saw the contents of the box in my hands. Without a word, he enveloped me in his arms, taking the doll and the note from my shaking hands, his own expression one of horror and fury. "I'm so sorry, Ella. I'm so sorry," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "This is unforgivable." As I clung to him, the walls I had built to hold back my grief crumbled. This was supposed to be a simple birthday celebration, a day of joy, and it had turned into a reminder of the deepest pain I carried. Tom, pale with fury, clutched the small doll and the cruel note his sister had given me. Without a word, he stormed into the living room, where everyone was still gathered, chatting idly. "Look at this. Look at what Karen thought was an appropriate birthday gift for my wife." Tom's voice boomed, shaking with anger as he thrust the doll and the note into the center of the room. The chatter ceased instantly, everyone's eyes widening in shock as they processed the gruesome symbol and the hateful words. "This is beyond sick, Karen," Tom yelled, turning to face his sister, who stood frozen, her face a mask of feigned confusion and defiance. "Tom, Karen started, but Tom cut her off. "No. I don't want to hear your excuses. How could you be so heartless? You're my sister, but I can't even look at you right now. You're not part of this family if this is how you treat people. You're done here," he shouted, his words slicing through the tense air. Dad, who had been silent, his face a growing shade of red from anger, finally spoke up, his voice thundering. "Karen, get out of my house. I don't want to know you anymore. To think I raised someone capable of this." Karen, still clutching at some shred of pride, scoffed and headed towards the door. Once outside, she turned back, a sneer distorting her face. "Fine. But when he's gone, who do you think will inherit all this? My children are still his grandchildren." The audacity of her words struck us silent. We watched, stunned, as she walked to her car where her husband was waiting. Their voices carried back to us, the sharp sound of a heated argument breaking the cold night air. "You idiot! Do you realize what you've just done?" her husband's voice echoed through the parking lot. "Oh, shut up. It's not my fault they can't take a joke," Karen shot back, her voice shrill. Their children, forgotten in the commotion, stood by the doorstep, small and confused. My heart broke for them, witnessing such ugliness. Tom, his father, and I stood by the open door, the cold breeze sweeping in, mingling with the harsh words floating from the parking lot. None of us could find the words to speak. We simply stood there, the door eventually closing with a soft click that sounded final. Inside, the house felt emptier, the echo of the confrontation hanging in every corner. Dad put his arm around me, his old, tired eyes wet with unshed tears. "I'm so sorry, Ella. That anyone, let alone my own daughter, could do this." His voice trailed off, choked with emotion. Tom stood by, his jaw clenched, his usual warmth replaced by a cold fury. After a moment, he turned to me, his expression softening. "Ella, I'm so sorry. This should have been a happy occasion. I promise, we'll make this right. Somehow." A few months after that tumultuous birthday, things took another turn. We found out that Karen's husband had left her. He'd been banking on a hefty inheritance from Dad and couldn't handle the fallout of being cut off. Worse yet, Karen started drinking heavily, spiraling down so fast that she eventually lost her rights to see her kids. It was a mess, and those poor kids were stuck in the middle of it. One evening, after Tom and I had put the kids to bed in our guest room, they'd been staying with us temporarily, I brought up the subject that had been weighing on my mind. We were in the kitchen, Tom making a late cup of tea for us. Tom, we need to talk about your niece and nephew. This situation isn't getting any better, and they need stability," I said, leaning against the counter. Tom sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know. I've been thinking about that too. They're already like family to us. Maybe we should make it official?" I was thinking the same thing. "How do you feel about us becoming their legal guardians?" I asked, watching his reaction closely. He paused, then nodded firmly. "Let's do it. They need us, and I want them to grow up in a loving home. They've been through enough already." We decided to move forward with it, and after a series of meetings with social services and seemingly endless paperwork, we were granted custody of the kids. They were officially part of our family now, and their bright smiles made every bit of bureaucracy worth it. Dad was overjoyed when we told him the news. "I've got enough rooms in this big old house for all of you," he declared one afternoon as we all sat in the living room, a puzzle spread out on the coffee table. "Why don't you all move in permanently? Make it official." Tom and I exchanged a look, the idea having already crossed our minds. "We were hoping you'd say that, Dad. We'd love to," Tom responded, his voice steady, but I could hear the emotion just under the surface. "Good. It's settled then. This house should be filled with family, with laughter and love," Dad said, his voice stronger than I'd heard it in months. "Let's turn this place into a home again." That night, after tucking the kids into their new permanent rooms, Tom and I stood in the doorway of what used to be a guest room, now brightly decorated with posters and toys. "Feels good, doesn't it?" Tom said, wrapping an arm around my waist. "It feels right," I replied, leaning my head against his shoulder. "This house, these kids, your dad, this is family." Life in the big, old house was bustling now, filled with the sounds of children playing and the constant hum of family life. It was a Sunday morning, and the smell of bacon filled the air as I helped the kids set the table for a big family breakfast. "Can I carry the syrup, Mom?" Sammy, the younger one, asked, his eyes wide with the responsibility of the task. "Sure, but be careful. It's sticky, and we don't want to end up eating pancakes with syrup flour," I teased him, handing him the bottle. He nodded solemnly and walked as if he was balancing a pot of gold, his concentration comical. Jenny, his older sister, rolled her eyes at her brother's careful steps. "If you go any slower, we'll have to eat lunch instead of breakfast." Tom chuckled as he flipped another pancake. "Let him be, Jenny. He's doing a great job." As we settled around the table, Tom's dad, who we'd all started affectionately calling Grandpa, took his usual seat at the head of the table, looking around with a content smile. "I can't remember the last time this table was this full." "It's because of Ella," Tom said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "She's the one who's made this house a home again." I felt my cheeks warm with the compliment. "It's all of us, not just me. We're a team, right?" I said, looking around the table at the faces I'd come to love more than I could have imagined. "That's right," Grandpa said, nodding. "But you, my dear, you brought us back together when things were pretty tough. You've got a way of doing that." Later that day, while the kids were playing in the yard, Grandpa called us into the living room. He had a serious look about him, one we'd come to recognize as his announcement face. "I've been thinking," he started, "about this house and everything in it. I've decided to put it in trust for the kids. For their future." Tom and I exchanged surprised glances. "Dad, are you sure? That's a big decision," Tom said. "I've never been sure about anything. This house should stay in the family, and who better to keep it alive than those kids?" Grandpa said, his voice firm. "And Ella," he added, looking at me with a soft smile. "I want you to manage it until they're old enough. You've made it a home once, and I trust you'll keep it that way." I was touched, overwhelmed by his trust and generosity. "Thank you, I'd be honored," I managed to say, feeling a mix of pride and responsibility settle over me. As the day wound down, and I watched the kids chase each other around the garden, the laughter filling the air, I felt a deep sense of peace. Tom came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Looks like we did all right, huh?" "We did more than all right," I replied, leaning back into his embrace. "We made a family." And as the sun set over our home, I knew that no matter what the future held, we had built something enduring here, something that would last, carried forward not just by blood but by the love we shared.